So we're just really trying to quickly digest it and pivot from there.
All right. We're getting sound. All right, sound check. Tim, you give me a confirmation once you're good.
Stacy, I still don't see any pop-up on the
No, I don't either.
on the school
Okay.
website.
All right. We are good to go. Mark, all of the updates have been put up on. We have it on both the school board page. I pulled it off of there. I pulled it off of the front page on the alert. We are good on cable, and our sound is active. It is your turn, Mr. President Johnson.
All righty, let's get going.
Whenever you're ready, sir.
Bye, Eddie.
Go ahead, Mark. We're ready. Go ahead.
You ready?
Yep.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting. For those of you who expected to see us at 6:30, we had some technical difficulties that were preventing us from showing this live, and we wanted to make sure that the community had a full opportunity to view the meeting and see what was going on. So we thought it was better to try and resolve those problems before we started, and we understand that those are corrected now, so we're going to proceed with our meeting. This is our Committee of the Whole meeting for June 1st, 2020. For those of you who do want to follow along with our agenda, you can go to our website, which is livoniapublicschools.org. You can highlight over the board tab and you will see a link that says board meeting information. And if you left click on that, you'll see down to the left meeting agendas, and so you can follow along with our agenda. This is the meeting where you will see a lot more discussion than you will see at a regular or voting meeting, because this is where we really get into the nitty-gritty of the items that probably have already been presented to the board on one occasion. And now we're going to get into those items a little more in depth, ask more questions, and make sure that the items that are on the agenda are ready to go to our voting meeting, which will be, I believe, on the 15th. So with that, we'll start with item 1, our audience communication. I understand that we do not have any this evening, so we will move to item 2, our Committee of the Whole. And we have 2 items under Committee of the Whole. The first is LPS Task Force, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Oquist.
Andrea?
Thanks so much, President Johnson, and thanks to our community for your patience. We certainly wanted to be sure that you were all able to tune in, and so thanks for being with us this evening. We do have a number of items, and the first one is a follow-up item to something we shared with our community and with our Board of Education a couple of weeks ago, and so I'd like to give you a brief update on our LPS Return to Learn Task Force. We are getting underway as we speak. We have 18 members on our steering committee representing all of our stakeholder groups. We also have over 210 stakeholders who will be serving on the multiple subgroups for our task force. We are looking forward to getting this work underway, and really the task force was formed to be able to thoughtfully plan for a safe and effective return to school in the fall. We are desirous of having many voices be part of that work. In order to do that, we're going to ask our task force teams to research, develop, and provide recommendations for a range of potential re-entry scenarios based on CDC guidelines, the guidelines from the Michigan Department of Education, as well as the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. We know we have over 14,000 students entrusted to us and almost 2,000 staff. So we will not be rushing this process. We know that it is important to our families and to our staff that we are ready to return to school in a safe way in a successful way. And that takes a bit of time. And so we know there are a number of task force groups underway at the state level. They will be providing us guidance in this process. And our multiple subgroups, as well as our steering committee, will be hard at work. Again, currently we are underway with that work, and we will be continuing that through the beginning of August, at which time we will make formal recommendations to you, our Board of Education, with regard to our plan for a return to learn. Throughout that time, we will be updating our community, and so we'll share updates with our staff, with our parent community, with our community as a whole. We'll be sharing updates from each of our subgroups and the things that they are working on. And I just want to thank all of the parents, all of the staff members and board members who will be part of this work over the next couple of months. So we are ready to get underway. And again, we'll provide regular updates to you via this communication method through our board meetings, but also through email updates and updates on our district website. So we look forward to this task force work. We know that we have great minds and hearts that are up to the challenge. And again, we'll be watching closely the guidelines that come to us from the state, and also learning a great deal from our neighboring districts around us, as well as throughout this state and throughout the country. So we look forward to updating you on this work, and we are appreciative to all those who have volunteered to participate.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Any questions from the board? Okay, then we'll move on to item B, a board meeting calendar for 2020-2021. And again, Mrs. Oquist will lead us.
Well, this is a timely item since we're talking about the return to the next school year. Board of Education, you received, and it's also in the board material packet available to our community on our website under the board book, agenda, and related materials. We have a draft of a board meeting calendar that we'd like to propose for the next school year. As you know, our Board of Education process is to work initial items for your consideration through a study session, and then come to a committee meeting, and then finally bring items for your consideration and formal voting at a board meeting. We've continued to follow that with this recommended calendar. We have followed a pattern that we have utilized for the past number of years for our organizational meeting to take place at the end of July. And then we would move forward for the remainder of the month all the way through until June 14th of 2021. Just a quick note, we did add an additional meeting at the end of August. It's a study session scheduled for August 31st. So you will see two in August. We don't normally have two study sessions in August, but President Johnson thought it would be helpful for us to have that on the books, both for conversation related to any budget amendments that may take place. As we know, many of those items are still up in the air with regard to our governor and with regard to our state legislature, as well as we prepare, especially for the return to school for this school year, we may have some other items that we want to discuss with you or share with our community. So you'll see an added study session item, study session meeting on August 31st. And we, of course, worked through our normal calendar around school holidays and school breaks. And so if you have any questions or additions or changes to the calendar, please let me know, and we could certainly make those. If not, we will bring this to you for your consideration for voting on June 15th.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Any questions? Mrs. Burton.
In some of the years past, we have put our workshops into the calendar right at this point, even knowing that we may need to change the date, but just so that we don't go through a whole year without having them. I would like to suggest that we do that at this point if we can, whether we do that tonight or simply before we vote on it. Take one of the months that we have 3 meetings, not 4. We don't have a holiday on that fourth Monday, and schedule our 2 board workshops.
We could absolutely do it. I can work with President Johnson and take a look at our calendar. And I believe on the 15th, I might have misspoke. I believe on the 15th, we are voting on the organizational meeting to be held on July 27th. And then at the organizational meeting, we actually vote on the calendar for the remainder of the school year. So we have a bit of time. And so what we could do is I could work with President Johnson we could identify a couple of those dates, send them out to the board, and then we can discuss that again at our next meeting.
That sounds great.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so thank you, Mrs. Oquist, for putting all that together, and I'm sure we'll be able to work on a workshop or two. So that'll take us to item 3, our Building and Site Committee, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Centers.
All right, we have one item this evening, Mr. Francis, lease agreements for the 2020-2021 school year.
Good evening, everybody. My one item with the lease agreements, as discussed at last week's study session, we have 5 lessors that we are lessees that we are. I always gotta think about that one. Lessees that we are working, or that I'm working with on the renewal for the 2020-21 school year. So July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2021. All 5 have received their updated lease. I do have 2 of them back, and I've let them know if they get them to me this week, I will be able to bring them to the board next week for approval. So at this point, this will definitely be an agenda item for that I'm going to request for next week's voting meeting, and we'll have at least 2 of them to present to you for your review and for your approval. And I'm hoping that, because I've been told by a couple of them that they would have it in time before the week is out, but I'm just trying to get them to you as quickly as they give them to me. So if I do have any more than the current 2, which is currently Learning Tree, which is at Marshall, and Little Tots, which is at Cass, I have those 2 in hand. If I get anywhere from 1 to 3 more, I will certainly put them into the voting meeting for you as well. And just for the public, these are all pretty much folks that have been with us for a long time. In some cases, literally decades. But others, even 5-6 years is probably the shortest stay with us thus far with any of our current folks on our lease that are looking to return for the 2020-21 year.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, just chime in if you do.
Are we going to put that on the consent agenda?
That has been there in the past, I will say, but I'll leave that to the board.
I'm okay with consent agenda as long as they're returning leases without changes and without significant changes.
And that was going to be my question. Are there any significant changes to any of these?
There is almost literally no changes except for the dates, because based upon the current economic situation, there is not an increase in the rent based upon we do have a trigger in all leases with regard to being tied to CPI, but that is not something that there's not a CPI that occurred in the most recent number, so there hasn't been an increase.
Okay, based on that, I'm fine with it going to through consent.
Agree. Anything else?
I'm fine with it.
All right. Pretty quick. I think that concludes Building and Site then. Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. That'll take us to item 4, our Finance Committee, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Bonifield.
Thank you, President Johnson. Our first item is with Mrs. Smith, and we're going to do budget update.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Bonifield. I will start sharing my screen. I thought what we would do more for the benefit of the community, because I know the board is very familiar with how schools are funded. Just a general reminder of how schools are funded here in the state of Michigan. So each school district and charter school is paid a per pupil foundation allowance based on the number of students that are educated in our district. There's a local portion of the foundation allowance. So that is what was just voted on by our community back in August. It's an operating millage, and it's 18 mills that gets levied on non-homestead properties. So that would be not your primary residences, that would be on businesses. So we have that local portion of the foundation allowance, and there's also a state portion of the foundation allowance. And about 82% of the school aid fund is made up of 3 different taxes. And I'm actually going to pop over, the next tab shows a pie chart, which sometimes the pictures just speak 1,000 words, right? So this was the 2018-19 school aid revenue sources for the school aid fund, which is what pays out our foundation allowance. And you can see that sales tax makes up 46% of the school aid fund. So this wouldn't be a surprise to most folks, you know, due to COVID-19 and folks staying home, we've seen a pretty significant drop in our sales tax revenue at the state level. So that has led to a deficit in the school aid fund for the 2019-20 school year. So this is a graph that was put out by the House or the Senate Fiscal Agency at the Revenue Estimating Conference that was held on May 15th. And just to get to the bottom line, there was a projected shortfall of about $1.1 billion in the school aid fund. So that is what we know at this time. What we don't know is how that shortfall is going to be resolved. One of the options would be for each school district to get a prorated share of that overage. And if that is the case, school districts could see a $650 to $700 per pupil cut for this fiscal year that's ending June 30th. So just 1 month from now. So what we walked through last week is what that impact will be. And I'll stop, Ms. Burton.
Mrs. Smith, could you enlarge your screen, the screen you're showing us just a bit?
I sure can. Yep.
Thank you.
And again, this is what we're looking at right here is published by the Senate Fiscal Agency. If anybody wanted to go, it's out, I believe, on their website. So it's a school aid fund. And again, if we jump down to the bottom, we can see their projected revenue is now less than what their current appropriations are. So that's what's causing this $1.1 billion shortfall. So what we walked through last week at our study session was what that impact would be on our general fund. I will share with you, it seems like new information is coming out every day. And there's been news that just came from the Tri-County Alliance, and it indicated that there was talk from the governor as well as the Senate Majority Leader saying that, you know, making such a significant cuts to school districts in this school year just isn't even an option. So that's very promising. That's saying that the legislators, I think, are very interested in doing what they can. But the problem we have is obviously our budgets need to be approved by the board by June 30th. So what I'm proposing we do is move forward with the information we know at this time. And if new information becomes available that's substantiated, then we will definitely keep the board updated on that and then bring that forward in the budget recommendation we bring to you on June 15th. So I wanted to just start with that piece of information. I'll now jump into the details of our general fund and some of the budget assumptions we're making for the remainder of the 1920 school year, as well as we'll move into the 2021 school year. So we started this school year off with just under a $31 million fund balance. And a fund balance is in essence a savings account. We projected revenues to be in the neighborhood of $159 million for this school year. That was the estimate as of January when the board adopted the last budget amendment. Since then, we have various revenue adjustments totaling just under a loss of $600,000 in revenue. That's items primarily related to the closure. For instance, with facilities not being able to rent it, that's a drop in the facility usage fees. With some of the programs, the fee-based programs we operate, such as our daycare, we're not collecting revenue as we're not providing services at that time. So we've had to make various adjustments to the revenue for that. There's also on the next line item down is Wayne County payments, and there's a credit of just under $900,000. I do have new information even since our last board meeting. We have learned that the Wayne County Treasurer is planning to do their normal make-whole payments for property taxes. So that is positive news. So this dollar amount was is less than what I showed you last week. But what's still unknown is the Wayne County enhancement millage. There's an in-depth reconciliation process involved with that. And so our ISD, Intermediate School District, is still not confident that we are going to get that revenue before June 30th. So what I have done is put back our property taxes into our current budgeted revenue. But what I am still backing out is the rest of the Wayne County enhancement millage revenue that we haven't received yet this year. So the good news on Wayne County enhancement millage is not that this is lost revenue. It's still going to be coming to the district, but it could simply just not be coming in this, in time for us to count it in the 1920 budget. So if it doesn't come in the 1920 budget, we'll most likely see it in the 2021 budget, along with what our normal allocation would be for next year. The next line item is what a $650 per pupil cut would mean for our general fund, which is a $9 million loss in revenue. So this is obviously very difficult for school districts to learn of such a significant cut happening so far into our school year, with only a few weeks left of the school year and very little time to do any kind of a expenditure adjustments. That's very hard for districts to handle. So please be rest assured, I had meetings with our administrators, and we have asked all non-essential purchases to be put on hold just to try to negate some of this cut. But again, with only a few weeks left, we haven't been able to make significant changes in our expenditures. So the next item that I propose we include in this year's budget is an incoming transfer from our health and welfare fund of $1.6 million. So this is a result of a change in our contract language in our teacher's contract. Formerly, health insurance benefits ran from September through August. And this year, for the first time, the benefits now run from July to June. So this results in a credit in the accounting side of things. And so what we're proposing is recognizing that one-time credit in the general fund. So moving the funds that are generated from that over to our general fund. And then the last recommendation that I'm making towards the board is to utilize all of our 31A at-risk funds this school year that are available to us. We had originally planned to carry over about $1.1 million of our 31A money to use next year, but in light of the given situation, we have a number of expenditures in our general fund that are 31A eligible costs, and we think it would be in our best interest to recognize those expenditures this year as 31A expenditures so that we can recognize this revenue. So with all of those adjustments made, our total projected revenue for 1920 is now $151.4 million. So quite a change from where we thought we'd be in January, again, because of primarily this looming cut that could be taking place. So moving on to the current budget expenditures, as of January, when the last budget was adopted or approved by the board, we were projecting our expenditures to be about $160.7 million. Due to the closure, we've had some cost savings, which has helped, obviously, with the revenue being down. We also have some costs, though, that aren't due to the closure. They're just deferred cost. For instance, back in the fall, the board approved a school bus purchase, and we were fortunate enough to apply for a grant that would pay for 40% of the buses and leave 60% of the cost for the district. So that was approved. We've put the purchase order on, but those buses won't be received by June 30th. So therefore, that's a cost that was originally put into this budget that'll now be put into the 2021 budget. I did want to share with the board, we did reach out to the manufacturer of the buses a few weeks ago when we did learn of the pending or potential cuts to find out if it was even an option for us to put the bus purchase on hold. Not because the bus purchase isn't needed, but again, just to know what our options are. And they had begun production of the buses already. So we didn't, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to now back out on our purchase. So that has been adjusted in the 1920 budget and included in the 2021 budget. So one change too that I've made since last week, I had included more of a negative adjustment for the expenditures last week. I'd like to back down on that a bit and kind of keep some of what has been appropriated in the budget. And the reason for that is I'm reminded that the district cannot spend, a dollar more than what the board has appropriated. So I think it would be more prudent for us to leave a little bit of a cushion in the 1920 budget, and then adjust what our projected beginning fund balance is. You might recall this year for the first time, school districts typically use their projected ending fund balance as their beginning fund balance for the next school year. But this year, for the first time, we didn't do that. We recognized that we would most likely have about $1 million worth of budget remaining at the end of the 18-19-20 school year. So we included that in our proposed budget for the following year. And so that is what I am recommending that we do with our budget for the 2021 year as well as the 1920. So you'll see as we get towards the bottom, it doesn't change our bottom line from what we looked at last week. But again, it's just putting a little bit more of, I'll call it a cushion in the 1920 budget. Again, it's expenditures that have already been approved by the board back in January, and it's me simply not reducing the expenditures maybe as much as they potentially could be down. So with that all into consideration, our projected expenditures for the 1920 school year is $156.8 million, and that would leave us with an ending fund balance of about $25.5 million, or a 16.3% fund balance. And this would mean that we would be using about $5.4 million worth of our budget. I'll stop too, just to remind our community, again, the board knows this, but the recommended fund balance from the Michigan school business officials is 15 to 20%. I know when we look at these large dollar amounts as a fund balance, it's sometimes hard to comprehend. But again, based on what our professional organization here in the state of Michigan recommends, that puts us right in line with what they recommend as an ending fund balance. So I'll pause there. That was a lot. If there aren't any questions, I'll move on to the 2021 school year.
I'm just going to hop in for a quick moment, Mrs. Smith. Thank you. So I just wanted to spend a moment because we have also received that question as we've heard the governor and again the Senate Majority Leader speak out with regard to their opposition to the per pupil cut for this school year. We have been asked about the fact that we are still budgeting for that per pupil cut. It's a great question. And so as you know, we went to our auditors and we asked that question with regard to their recommendation for our preparation of this final budget amendment, as well as our planning for next year. And their professional recommendation was until we have confirmation that that cut is not taking place, that at this point in time, we've been advised to plan for that proration and that cut for the current school year, the current fiscal year. And if something changes, as Mrs. Smith said, over the next 2 weeks prior to the board voting on it, we will certainly make that budget adjustment. But until we have confirmation, we are reliant on the things that have been shared publicly. However, they are not, they've not been voted on formally by either the state government or the federal government at this time. And so until that action takes place, the responsible thing to do is to plan for that and then make the budget adjustment as we go forward. So I just wanted to take a moment on that piece because again, we are hopeful. You'll see later in this meeting that we are going to ask the Board of Education to pass a formal resolution with regard to our advocacy for that support from our state and federal government with regard to those budget cuts. But until that happens, we do have a responsibility to include that in our budget. So we just wanted to spend a moment on that, not only for our board, but for our community as well.
Mrs. Oquist,
Yes.
I have a question regarding the last little bit that you said there where we may or may not get the $650 cut. But has there been any talk about if they don't cut us for this year, but then it's going to be a $1,300 cut next year, and they're just going to shift it to make?
I have not heard that. I've heard the recommendation to us was to plan on that proration for both this year and then that same amount for next year. I've not heard any discussion with regard to zero for this year, but a doubling of that for next year. So certainly we are watching that very closely from our state organizations as well as through our local representatives as well.
And I will agree with that too. I'm going to pop over real quick to that school aid fund snapshot, that balance sheet, so you can see what they're projecting, what they're estimating for the 2021 school year is again to be shy that $1 billion. So that would lead me to think that if they do find additional revenue to make the 1920 school year whole, that negative balance doesn't roll forward to 2021. It would be taken care of then in the 2021 school year. I'm sorry, it would be taken care of in the 1920 school year. So for 2021 next year, we'd be back to, you know, $1 billion shortfall. And again, it would be appropriate to budget for about a $650 cut next year, unless something comes along to make that less.
Can I jump in just a second? Allison, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. You know, this board has always been fiscally responsible. And quite honestly, I always prefer to be on the cautious side. I think we're much better off being conservative and budgeting, not necessarily for the worst case scenario, but in light of the information that we're receiving out of Lansing, I'd much prefer to budget for the conservative side, and then we're not surprised. The last thing we want to do is budget for something that may be in the middle of the road and then have the rug pulled out from underneath us, as we've seen in the past, and not be able to deal with it as quickly. So I'm always of the opinion that you're better off to be on the more conservative side and hope that it's not as bad as we think it could be.
I agreed. And the nice thing again with the budget process is it allows for amendments. So it's not like the budget that we set in June this year is what we've got to live with for an entire school year. We have the opportunity to come together and work together and amend it as more information becomes available.
Mrs. Bonnefield? Tammy?
She waved
Sorry,
to go.
go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go
That's-
ahead. Sorry, I've only got like 3 of you guys on the side, so.
Okay. I agree with the decision to leave that 650 in per the $650 per student cut in for the moment, for the time being. We can only go on the best information that we have, and right now that is what we are being told. As large and horrible a number as that is, and to put it in perspective for the folks who don't follow this as closely, 10 years ago when we received a mid-year cut, it was $400 and some dollars, $420 per student. This is $650. This is a huge number, and it is my fervent hope and prayer that this does not come to pass. But right now, today, this is what we're being told. It's possible even by the end of June, when we have to take a formal vote on this, this budget, that might change. But right now, we are being told that this is what we better plan on. So I think that is the only responsible thing that I can do is believe them. Even too, when hopefully we will get some of this money, or some of this. Hopefully the 650 will not be the final figure that we have to deal with, and hopefully it won't be in this current school year. But even if it is, we've learned that sometimes the devil's in the details. It might be that it looks like it's coming back to us in one pocket, but taken out of a different one. So until we see what really is going to be given to us for this school year, whether or not we're going to have this massive shortfall or not, I think we have to go on what we know today to be best knowledge that we have. Hopefully it won't come to pass, but if it does, I want to prepare for what we know realistically today.
Tammy,
Go ahead, Krista.
I agree with what everyone has said so far, and I think that it cannot be stressed enough, just the significance that this is to our budget. I think that you both have said it well, but this is a huge hit to us, like Colleen said, and the previous boards have done such a fantastic job of being fiscally conservative so that we could build up a fund balance and have worked so hard, and now to see us have to use it is hard. But to forego some projects that we had planned that we were really excited about, that's really hard. But I had a couple questions for Mrs. Smith. One, I think it's important just to talk through, you have balanced it beautifully, but you said that you're leaving that $1 million cushion in there. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about through that. Could you tell us a couple of things that we're gonna keep in the budget? And the other piece is, it's not things that the board has not already approved. It's not a cushion, like they're just $1 million that's just there that you can use at your discretion. It's still board approved. It's still things that we had approved. We were just going to take it out of the budget as a budget cut.
Yep, exactly. So that is correct. So again, these were things that were approved by the board back in January. So things such as like repairs, different teaching supplies, things like that. So what I had done when we last met last Monday was kind of say, what if none of that stuff, what if it was only what's been charged to date, were to come to fruition. But what I didn't account for is there are some invoices in essence that have been incurred that haven't been put through the system yet. And I would hate for, something to come through that hasn't, again, been paid, that's been an approved project or an approved expenditure, but hasn't been paid yet. I would hate for us to cut that budget and then be in a position that I have to come to the board and say, I'm sorry, we ended up going over on this line item, and that this is the reason why it was, in their approved budget in January, and then I cut it in June and I cut it too much, so that's like a primary example. We are seeing the things that we know, that can be adjusted have been adjusted. For instance, like our utilities, we are seeing savings in our utilities. So that's being reflected in this decrease of 3.8 million. We are seeing savings in things such as overtime or additional duty stipends. And so those are things that we've communicated with our administrators. All of that is on hold, don't proceed with that. So that's been adjusted in the budget. So these are more things, even like the additional allocations that we did in January for our buildings, like building beautification projects, school library or class libraries, things like that, that I was a little bit, I think, too quick to reduce the budget lines. Again, not really allowing for some of those purchases that had maybe begun but not come through the system yet. So that was where I wanted to put some of that back in. And again, I'm not assuming that all of those funds are going to be used, but again, because they were approved, it wouldn't be wrong for a department, for instance, to have already spent that funds. So that's why, again, I'm not making the cut so significant for this final amendment. But when I say that, it's still, a $3.8 million adjustment to our expenditures, but yet I'm not leaving it so bare that we're going to be exposed to potentially having line items come in over budget.
Thank you.
Okay. So we'll look forward then to the plan for next school year. Next, correct?
Yep. And did I see a question, Dan? Did you want to speak to the 1920?
Just wanted to say that I think right now, with unknowns, it's appropriate to take a conservative approach, and I agree with my colleagues. So that's all.
Thank you. So I will move on to the 2021 school year. The first item I'll point out is that beginning fund balance of $25.9 million. You can see, or almost $26 million. You can see the ending fund balance is almost 25.5. So here I'm saying that minimally, $500,000 has been appropriated at this time. I'm assuming will go unspent in the 1920 school year. So I'm adding that to our beginning fund balance for the 2021 school year. So we start off the revenue kind of with an assumption that the revenues that we received this year will be coming to us again next year. And then what I've done is gone through line by line and made adjustments for, again, things that we know that at this time or that we should adjust for. So the first item that you'll see, and actually I should start even before I jump into all the line items. So what this means too is when we start off with that prior year revenue, that $650 cut that we budgeted for 1920 has now rolled forward to the 2021 school year. So you won't see another line item for that $650 cut. That's because it's included in the prior year revenue. So the next line item that I've adjusted for is a student loss. Right now we're budgeting for about 200 students, to be down about 200 students. So we spend quite a bit of time looking at enrollments. I know Mr. McDonald, that's his life for a big chunk of his workday is, following those trends. And so we are actually looking pretty good as far as classes moving up and graduating seniors and what we predict is incoming kindergartners. But what we wanted to include in this budget is the fact that we do have a bit of an unknown. We are doing our best and we're going to put wonderful options together for our families. But the fact is, this pandemic could impact families' choices for the fall. And so we wanted to reflect that in this budget. Again, we're very hopeful that all of our families are going to continue on with us in the fall. But we did feel like we needed to put some kind of an adjustment into the revenue in the case that not all of our families come back. So if 200 students were to not return, that would be about a $1.6 million reduction in our revenue for the 2021 school year. The next item I've accounted for is those Wayne County payments. That's the Wayne County enhancement millage. Again, this would be the money that we should have received in 1920, as well as assuming that we're going to get our full payment in the 2021 school year. So that would be a positive revenue adjustment of about $1.9 million for next year. The next adjustment I've made is backing out the 31A carryover because it would have been fully expended in the 1920 school year, so that won't be available. What will be available is whatever the state appropriates for 31A next year. And I say 31A, and I realize those watching at home, so 31A is for additional funds to help our at-risk learners. And so it's kind of the state's version of the federal Title I grant. So that's what that is. It's the state grant. The next item that I've adjusted for, we had included a one-time transfer from the health fund in 1920. And so once that money is transferred over from the health and welfare fund, it won't be there to transfer again. So I backed out that $1.6 million. I've also made various revenue adjustments to the tune about $1.2 million. One example of what's included in there, for instance, is our Medicaid reimbursement. We have various staff that support our students, Medicaid eligible students, and we bill for services that we provide to those students. And the revenue is received on a one-year lag. So the services provided in 1920 will be reimbursed to the district in 2021. And due to the closure, being closed between March and June, I'm assuming some of those Medicaid eligible services that we provided won't have taken place. Therefore, our reimbursement next year won't be what it was this year. So those are just a few of the adjustments I've made in that line. The next item I am proposing for the board's consideration is a transfer from our capital projects fund. So this capital projects fund that I'm referring to is the fund where we put our one-time revenues from our sales of property, typically into this fund for capital improvement projects around the district. I am projecting that there will be about $1.5 million available in that fund that we could use now in the general fund. And the reason that that's possible, per board policy, if our fund balance is between the MSBO recommended rate, per board policy, any sale of property would go into the capital projects fund. But because we're projecting our fund balance to dip below the 15% in 2021, we would be allowed to transfer that money out of the capital projects fund and put it into our general fund. So I'm proposing that we do that. Again, that might not be necessary, you know, if things change, but that's something that I think we could plan for, and we could make the transfer if we need to for this coming year. The other item I'm proposing is a transfer from our special education fund. We have typically targeted to keep about a $1 million fund balance in our Act 18 program. And that's in recognition that we operate these countywide programs, and the county does reimburse us for certain indirect costs incurred by the district. And there are some costs incurred for the program that they wouldn't reimburse us for, such as our facilities. If the roof, for instance, were needing to be repaired at Garfield Community Schools, that's not something we could invoice the county for and that they would pay it for us. We'd have to pay for that ourselves. So that's something where having a fund balance that we could draw on would be helpful. So that's why we're keeping a fund balance in there. But you know, when there's a need for the general fund, it's, you know, I think we have that option to look at what the target fund balance is and to say, do we need the $1 million? Would it be appropriate for us to drop that down to 500,000? And then when things improve again in the general fund, maybe we readjust that back to $1 million. You know, that's a possibility. But for now, you know, I think a $500,000 fund balance in the special education fund would help us get through, you know, anything that might come up in the foreseeable future for our county run programs. Next up is the sale of Webster, Wilson, and Adams. We had originally discussed this going into the capital projects fund, but again, because our fund balance is estimated to drop below the 15%, I am suggesting that we budget for that sale of Webster, Wilson, and Adams in our general fund. And I do want to make it very clear that we have purchase agreements for 2 of the properties, but there is still an opportunity for the developers during their due diligence to back out of that. And so if that were the case, I would have to come back to the board and provide you with an update, and we'd have to adjust our budget accordingly. But these sales typically do go through. So for that reason, we do feel comfortable including that revenue into these budgets. And then the last revenue adjustment I've made for the 2021 school year is an allocation that we know that we've received through the CARES Act. We're receiving funds from the ESSER grant in the amount of about $1 million. We'll be attending some trainings actually Wednesday, you know, on this. But what I do believe we'll be able to do is use this to offset some of our costs that potentially would be cut because of the budget implications. We would have had to cut these costs, and I believe we'll be able to use the CARES fund to maintain some of our programs. So what we're proposing doing is including that in our general fund revenue. So I'm projecting that for the 2021 school year, we'll have revenues in the neighborhood of $153.5 million. So that combined with our available fund balance will give us just under $180 million available to appropriate. So I will stop if anybody has any questions on the revenue side. If not, I'll move on to the expenditures. Ms. Jarvis has her hand up.
Yep, Mrs. Smith, I just wanted to clarify for those who are listening at home that when we say sale of Webster, we're referring to the open space where old Webster was on Linden, and that is what was put up for sale and not anything related to the former Tyler site.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis. I'm actually going to enter that in right now.
Go ahead, Colleen.
This is something that Mrs. Bonifield brought up last week, and I've thought about it, and I do agree with her. I have concern with us utilizing transfer from capital projects fund of 1.5 million and the sale of Webster, Wilson, and Adams of 2.5 million, which is a total of $4 million out of capital projects funds. The capital projects fund is intended for one-time purchases or very, very irregular purchases. I would actually feel a little more comfortable if even if we left the sale of Old Webster, Wilson, and Adams in this and took the 1.5 out of fund balance. I'm concerned with utilizing both of those pieces that originally would have been in capital projects, because we still do have ongoing capital projects needs in the district. I don't like utilizing both of the pieces that would have been capital projects if we can take a little bit more out of fund balance. Fund balance has been built up over the last 10 years. And again, I said it last week, I'll say it again this week. I credit our administration, our staff, our community for supporting this, that we have worked very, very hard to build up our fund balance so that if crises hit, and heaven knows this is a crisis, we can utilize those dollars to get us through. I'm glad that we are utilizing those to the extent that we are. I'm comfortable with the budget that you've presented, Mrs. Smith, with this one exception. I really hope that we can take a hard look at removing one of those two pieces and leaving it in capital projects so that we can utilize that for those purposes.
Mrs. Bonnefield, may I hop in? Thank you. So, Mrs. Burton, I think you're reading our minds. We have had some extensive discussion about that since our study session, and one of the things we'd like to recommend after Mrs. Smith goes through the expenditures for next year, the proposed expenditures, what we'd like to do is propose to you the order in which we would put things back into the budget, or not take things out of the budget, not take things out of those other funds. If we should have a change either in this year's per pupil cut that we're anticipating or next year's, because as you know, that's an almost $9 million hit each year.
Right, 2 times.
What we'd like to do is propose really an order of operations, so to speak, of the things that we would recommend to bring back to you to put back into the our original practice. And so if Mrs. Smith could go through the expenditures, and then we'd like to make recommendations to you with regard to the targeted budget reductions, and then also those 2 transfers from funds, and ask the board just exactly what you're saying, which is what would be your preference as far as the first things that we would remove from this list as a way to look to balance next year's budget. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, that would be great. So that we were thinking along those very lines, because I think we've been very judicious over the past number of years to look at what is one-time revenue and what is ongoing legacy revenue that would be commensurate with ongoing legacy costs. And so that is the reason why those dollars were put into the capital projects fund to be used for those one-time expenditures. And so certainly this is all part of that planning in a financial crisis situation to determine how should those dollars best be used. But we certainly understand what you're saying and really concur with that line of thinking.
Okay.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
Sorry, go ahead. I can't see you guys, so go ahead.
Okay. Mrs. Smith, before we leave the revenue side, in the 200 student loss, is that a net number that includes our school of choice students?
That is a net number, yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Taking a look at our expenditures, I'm again starting off with the current expenditures being kind of our base for the 2021 school year, and then making various adjustments from there. The number of line items have been adjusted just shy of $240,000. We did have a number of one-time expenditures this year, so that would be savings then in the 2021 school year because we wouldn't be incurring them. I have included our bus purchase, so that is about $1.3 million for the buses, with Again, about $850,000 coming from grant funds for 22 propane buses. I've also adjusted for the retirement rate increase. So this isn't something the district has any control over. Employees of the district are automatically enrolled in a pension or a defined contribution plan or a defined benefit plan from the Office of Retirement Services. And so each year they go through and recalculate what the retirement saving or retirement rates are in order to meet our obligations. So that rate, even though it's gone up, just less than 1%, I think it was maybe 0.71%, because so much of our budget is salaries, that little percentage actually works out to about a $600,000 increase in additional retirement costs for the coming school year. I've also adjusted for the hard cap increase for health insurance. So this would be the second half of the hard cap for July through December, as well as the hard cap increases for January through June of 2021. This past March, the state of Michigan did publish what the CPI increases for hard cap, and it was 3.3%. So that has been fully budgeted for next year. We are going to see some savings from retirements and new hires. The net of those two things is to the tune of about $1.8 million. So that's typically, folks that are retiring typically have worked their way up to the top of our pay scales, and then we're typically able to hire new staff on at the beginning steps. So we see some savings there. The next item is for scheduled step increases of about $2.9 million. So this represents the second year of our 3-year employee contracts that we have with each one of our employee groups. So these were amounts agreed upon last school year, and that will be going into effect for the 2021 school year. And the last item is targeted budget reductions. We wanted to present the board with a budget for 2021 that maintained at least a 13% fund balance. So for us to keep a 13% fund balance, that would require us to identify about $400,000 worth of cost containment measures that we would need to take for the 2021 school year. So with all of these adjustments taken into consideration, our projected expenditures for next year are $158.9 million, and that would leave us with a projected ending fund balance of $20.6 million, or a 13% fund balance. And that would require us using about $5.3 million worth of our fund balance. I want to pop over real quick to a second tab and then come back. As Ms. Oakwood shared, we want to get the board's thoughts on what things you would like us to adjust if the 1920 budget cut maybe isn't as significant as what we're including here tonight. But I did want to show you on the second tab simply what it would mean if that hole was filled and that we did not see a $650 cut, if they were able to find $1.1 million from either a rainy day fund, from federal funding. So I've left everything else constant that we just looked at on the other page, but then I've carried that through. If we didn't see the cut this school year because of some of those cost savings this year, as well as some of the deferred expenditures, we would actually have a $34.4 million ending fund balance this school year. Our fund balance would be 22%. And instead of using our fund balance, we would actually be adding to the fund balance by about $3.5 million for the 1920 school year. And again, that's not all savings. A chunk of that is deferred costs that haven't been spent this year. The largest being that school bus purchase that was included in this year's budget that will happen next year. Another being our textbooks too that we have budgeted for this school year that will be taking place next school year. So, but again, if we didn't see that $650 cut, we would be looking at an ending fund balance of 22% this school year. And then looking at the 2021 school year, I did then include a $650 cut for next year, because as we saw, that would be a shortfall for next year. But we would be ending the school year with an 18.6% fund balance next year. And we would still be utilizing fund balance because of that significant cut. We'd still be using about $5.3 million, but our ending fund balance next year would be 18.6%. So, pretty significant change in our bottom line. So needless to say, we'd be very supportive of the measures that the legislators can do to help us. So I wanted to show that to you. Obviously, if this is the case, I think there is a lot of opportunities to go through some of these adjustments that we've had to make and, you know, take them out. For instance, the transfer some of the capital projects fund. This too, if our fund balance was 18.6, could mean putting that or would mean putting that sale of property back into the capital projects fund. So a lot of that would take place again if we didn't see that cut. But because we don't know if that's going to happen or not, that's why we're recommending to the board that we do go ahead and budget for that. So with that, I will pop back over just from some of the conversations that we had last week at the study session. You know, I believe there was some thoughts that, you know, one of the things you'd like to see added back would be that the targeted budget reductions of $400,000 that, you know, if we don't need to make those cuts, you know, that would be something the board would be supportive of. I do want to reassure you that regardless of what funding, you know, what happens, what the cuts are, that we are going to be very diligent at exploring all of our options for cost savings. That just because relief comes through for the 1920 school year doesn't mean that we're out of the woods. We still need to be very judicious with our expenditures and look at everything. One thing I did want to run by the board and say it's something we're even just kind of considering. Our property casualty insurance is a pretty significant cost to the district. That's something we've been with the same plan, you know, for a number of years. And there's, you know, no reason to be dissatisfied, but because of it being a significant cost, one of the things I did want to run by the board was potentially getting a quote, you know, for another carrier for our property casualty insurance. So, you know, there could be potentially some savings there. Our terms with our current carrier requires them to give them a notice, a 1-year notice that we might be, you know, moving to another carrier. So if that is something that board would be interested in me pursuing, I would most likely need to bring something to the board to get a resolution from you saying that it is okay for me to, you know, look for another carrier, and then we can notify our current person. So that's just one of the items, for instance, that we're looking at as far as ways that we can save money for future years. So getting back to the targeted budget reductions, again, I know that was something that we heard last week at the study session that the board would be interested to see, you know, potentially adding those cuts back. And then from last week and this week, I think some of those transfers from the capital projects fund and potentially the sales of property to see those get added back to the budget. But again, we wanted to give you an opportunity to let you know, or you let us, I'll try this one more time, wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us, you know, what is important for you to see. Again, if the funding picture were to change maybe for the 1920 school year and some of these adjustments aren't needed, you know, kind of where you would, the direction and where you would like us to head with that. One thing I could do too, sorry to ask you a question and then I jumped right back in. With this being Excel too, I could show you, you know, what the impact would be. For instance, if we didn't make that transfer from capital projects, you know, I can zero that out. And you can see that drops, that adds about a 1% fund balance for our thing. So we can see if I zero out the transfer from capital projects fund, our ending fund balance would be about 12% for next year if we saw that cut. I'm going to move over to our other spreadsheet where, again, we, on this tab, we didn't see the cut in the 1920. It was just in the 2021 school year. If I zero out that capital projects fund transfer, you can see we would still be ending with a 17.7% fund balance. I can even take it one step further and back up that sale of property, and we'd still be at a 16.1. So again, based on board policy, I would say if we don't get the cut in the 1920 school year, those you know, those would remain in the capital projects fund. So just wanted to show you that. Now I really will be quiet and give you an opportunity to share your thoughts.
All right, guys, just jump in. I can't see everybody.
Okay, Allison, thank you. I just want to thank you for showing us the different scenarios, because I think that really gives us a idea, if we don't get the cuts, what our fund balances will look like or projected to look like. it is pretty devastating to see that we are going to be cutting about what 9 million per year for the next 2 years if everything goes the way it goes, and we're going to be cutting into that fund balance. But like all my other colleagues, I agree we are really fortunate that we do have such a high fund balance right now. So I think that helps us. I do have concerns going into year 3, and if this trend continues, you know, what's going to happen with our fund balance. I think we have to be real careful about the future. But I had a question about, do we anticipate additional expenditures? And I guess it's hard to say right now, as far as what we may need to do to ready our schools for the students coming in. I'm suggesting additional cleaning, maybe plexiglass. We don't know any of that type of information yet, if we're going to have additional expenditures for masks or things like that. So I don't know, that's just my question. What might we have to project that we
In
might
the
have?
preliminary budgets, I have included things for things like additional hand sanitizer, additional masks. I budgeted for those health supplies. So we do have some included in the 2021 school year. We're also definitely keeping our pulse on grant funds that are available for such things. This budget, the 1920 budget, did include those machines just approved by the board. I think it was last month, the disinfectant machines. So that'll definitely help with preparing for students' return and staff's return next school year. So thankfully, we have included some of those budget projections, and those are exactly the conversations and the things that we're looking to walk through as the task force gets underway, to identify exactly, you know, what things might be.
Yeah, I'm guessing we'll just have a better idea as time goes on, and we find out what kind of plan we're going to be putting in place and what we're going to need. So hopefully that's not going to be too much, but just wondering. But thank you for putting this together, because it really gives us a good visual on where we may be. And there's so many unanswered questions. It's frustrating, really, to try to figure out how to get a budget when we have so many unknowns. But I like that you were able to show us all the different scenarios. So thank you. And I agree. I think we can put some money back into the capital projects fund. I'd be interested in that, and I would be very interested in that 400,000 budget reduction. Nobody likes to see us reduce different things with staffing or classroom. You know, we hope not to see anything like that. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'd want to point out a couple of quick things with regard to that, Mrs. Bradford. We are actually working also at a county level with regard to some of that PPE equipment and getting pricing on a very large scale. And so we've made some very preliminary estimations with regard to some of our needs for those supplies for next year. And we will be working in a consortium for purchasing that type of equipment. And again, as Mrs. Smith said, we'll be looking to secure any grant funds that are available for that type of equipment, as well as we have budgeted for some of those additional measures. While we don't know the exact needs, we absolutely have begun to plan for some of those additional costs. And as each of the subgroups for the task force continue with their work, one of their columns and one of their considerations that they will continuously bring back to the steering committee are any budget implications their recommendations may have. And then that's something the steering committee and ultimately the Board of Education will review as well. So I do know that's something that at a state level, they are aware that our costs will increase in that regard. And so we're certainly hoping that that will be something that will be taken into consideration. And I do want to say, I know we talked about this a lot last week, and I just want to be sure for our community that's following this meeting that our recommendations and the board weighing in on these proposals have really kept our progress that we've made in the classroom and the supports for our learners and class size at the forefront. And so I really don't want that to get lost in our recommendations, because although we're talking about some budget transfers and some targeted budget reductions, the recommendations were very much focused on keeping the progress we have made for our students and staff intact, and having that continue, that great progress continue. And the board was extremely supportive of that at our study session when we discussed it. And I wanted to be sure that that the community knows that, again, that work that we've made over the past few years to impact those areas positively are the things that we really kept at the forefront and protected as much as possible in these budget recommendations.
Allison, a question that I have, and I know it's been brought up a couple of times, you know, what about the third year or the fourth year? I think we're in a really good position because we've tried really hard to plan for exactly this situation. And we can get through this. But I have to imagine that there are other school systems out there that are not in as lucky of a position as we are. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is this is not a sustainable model. So if they're going to cut us $9 million potentially this year, even if they cut us $9 million next year, it is not sustainable for them to, you know, continue to make these huge cuts, or even make any reductions. And I know last week we talked about, rather than cutting the foundation allowance, that this is going to be a line item in the budget as a reduction, so that it's much easier to take out and maybe has a lesser long-term effect, because we can just X out that, I know it's all psychological, but we can X out that, you know, line item reduction rather than trying to claw our way back with the foundation allowance like we have been for the last 10 or so years after that last cut. So I guess there's kind of a question there, and maybe just a thought process is, have your colleagues in the finance department talked about that this is not sustainable, and that at some point there's going to have to be some other options that we, and so, and part of that too is and we haven't done that, and Mrs. Oakwest just pointed that out very, very nicely, is that I don't want to see us shortchange our kids for a couple of years on the what ifs of coming up to that, you know, that third year. And like I said, that we've done very well of not doing that. But so Allison, I'm not sure if there's really an answer there.
No, I'm completely following you. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, you know, we're making a purposeful decision to utilize some of our fund balance so that we can maintain our programs for our students, so that it isn't felt, you know, what this does is it buys us a little time to allow the legislators to do what they do, and for us to move forward with, you know, the things that we're doing right now. We're very conscious, though, you know, as I'm looking at the 2021 revenue and the 2021 expenditures, our revenue is 153.5 and our expenditures are 158.9. You can't, you know, over the long course, your expenditures can't outpace your revenue at that. You're just going to quickly, you know, kind of go through your savings. So we're being very methodical with the use of the fund balance. We're, you know, allowing ourselves to kind of pan out and see what happens without having, again, devastating impacts on the students in front of us today. But we're very aware that, you know, if the funding really doesn't come through, we will need to be starting budget forums with our community and our families and our students to get their input, because it is something that we're going to have to start looking at the, you know, expenditures in the programming and seeing what adjustments do we make so that we are living within the revenue that we're getting on an annual basis. So that's conversations we're definitely willing to have, but we think again, because we're in the financial position that we are, we can let this, in essence, kind of ride for this, for these next few months again. So until we get a pulse on what's going to happen with the revenue, and then we can move forward from there. So, like you said, Ms. Bonnefield, it's one of those things that we're definitely advocating for the funding, because we need the funding. This isn't a model that's going to last for years, but it is something that will work for our district for this coming year.
Thank you. Okay,
Mrs.
guys. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Liz. Yep.
Mrs. Smith, you had mentioned about the possibility of looking into changing insurance carriers, and that's a wonderful idea. I don't endorse um, changing every year and just hopping, from carrier to carrier every year, but it's always good to step back and see what the market is like and what other insurance providers are would be offering. Also, to give our current carrier a chance to maybe lower rates in light of some of our recent improvements. So maybe some rate improvements could be forthcoming. Maybe we have not yet sat down and told them that we have new security and new roofs and all that. That could make a difference too. So definitely any way that we can lower that number, that would be a wonderful thing to look into.
Okay, guys, any more other questions for Allison for the budget?
Allison, can you just go back to the 1920 number? How much did we use? It was probably below my screen. How much did we use for fund balance from 1920?
If the $650 cut does go through, we would be using $5.4 million worth of our fund balance.
Okay, so it's basically 5 million both years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then if, again, if no cut were to take place next year, we would actually be adding to our fund balance a bit because of the deferred costs and some of the cost savings we have this school year. So.
Okay.
I do have, you guys are gonna love me tonight. I've got a few more tabs. I wanted to briefly run through our other funds. The general fund, by and large, is our largest fund. It's our operating fund. So we spend the most time on that, obviously. But I just wanted to give you a few highlights of our other ones, just so you can see how that flows through, some of these transfers we're making in to the general fund, how that impacts our other funds. So I'll go through kind of quickly. I want to be quick, but I want to be thorough. So please stop me if I'm going too fast or if you've got any questions. So the next tab is kind of the format that you're used to seeing, the form of our budget book. So this adopts it. Again, this is the outline prescribed by the Michigan Department of Education's accounting manual. So a breakdown between local, state, federal, and other financing sources. These last two columns are really the columns that we're kind of honing in on our final amendment and our proposed budget for next year. I'll highlight on the state funding side, you can see that dip from $115 million in state revenue down to 108. So that's that drop in the foundation allowance. And then you will see the uptick in the other financing sources, that going up both for the final amendment and the proposed. So that's those transfers from the other funds would be reflected on that line. So that's how that flows through on the general fund. I will share, this will all be in the budget book that goes to the board as part of your packet. So you'll have a chance to review this too. I don't want you to think we're rushing through it. You won't have another chance, obviously, to see this. And then, of course, I welcome any questions that you might have. Moving on to the expenditure side, again, kind of honing in on the final amendment and proposed. I won't spend too much time on here because we spent quite a bit of time just running through the general fund adjustments that I've made. I'll just highlight down at the bottom here the ending fund balances for both the final amendment, which would be 16.7%, and then the ending fund balance for next year, which would be 13%. And again, nothing, you don't see really significant changes on those individual line items. The funded projects, this is we keep a number of our grants separate. Some districts include these in their general fund just for accounting ease. We have separated them out. By and large, carrying forward a number of things. It's a little too early in the year for us to have definite numbers on what the grants are. So I'm backing out some of the local sources, and then once we get those, we can add those back to the budget. For the state sources, this is assuming kind of all of our categoricals remain the same for next year. As the budget comes out, we'll make adjustments for those. The one thing I did back out this year, we had applied for a competitive school safety grant, and that helped us with some of the door locks on our buildings. And there might have been some other things in that. That was a one-time grant. We've used those funds. So at this point, I'm not anticipating that grant for next year. So I backed that out. I've also updated our Title and Title II grants. We've gotten our preliminary allocations for that, and they are slightly down from what they were for 1920. So we've reflected that in our budget. So that is our grants. We also have our special education fund. Again, I'm not seeing any major changes from the 1920 school year into the 2021 school year. The one change that I will point out and show you how that flows through is the additional $500,000 transfer from the health and or from the special ed fund. If we do that, that does put us in the neighborhood of about a $500,000 fund balance for our special education fund. Next up is the food service and the health and welfare fund. Food service, I made the assumption that we would be back in school and kind of resuming normal activities. You can see in this final amendment, we had a rather large, shift from local sales. So that's our food sales to our pupils. So obviously without any kids in the cafeteria to sell the food to, the revenue has really been truncated to whatever we've received prior to the closure. But what you will see an uptick in is our federal reimbursement. So we are submitting reimbursement requests through the federal government for the food distributions that we're doing on Tuesdays to our family and recouping some funds there. So really, you're seeing just a change from local sales down to the federal reimbursement. On the health and welfare fund, on the food service fund. On the health and welfare fund, for the final amendment, again, I'm reflecting that credit that we're going to see in the premiums because of the change in contract language. And I'm also reflecting a potential $1.6 million transfer from the health and welfare fund into our general fund. And then in our proposed budget for 2021, this is adjusting the premiums for the us going to the hard, or for some premium increases that we would see here. Also on the revenue side, seeing some increases on that side. So a little backstory on the health and welfare fund is, so when our invoices come in, the insurance invoices are paid out of this fund, and then they're charged back out to all the funds, all the different programs, and then the chargeback comes in back into this fund as a transfer from other funds. So that's kind of how we fund the health and welfare fund. The debt millage, I won't go into all the details. This is pretty straightforward. So we have 3 outstanding series right now. We have our 2013 bond series 1, the 2013 bond series 2, and then our 2014 refunding. That was from a bond that was passed by the voters back in 1992 and was refunded in 2014. So I've updated all the expenditures based on our debt payment schedules for the coming year. I will tell you that our debt millage that we're proposing for this coming school year is the same as it was last year. So that's something that we'll cover on June 15th at our public hearing. But again, for our debt levies, it will be the same mills that we levied last year, and that will be sufficient to meet our debt payments for this coming school year. Moving on to our scholarship fund. This is one of the rather simple funds. We have, in essence, an endowment for some scholarships. We do $1,000 scholarships at each one of our high schools. So that comes through the scholarship fund. So I've updated that based on the new, beginning balance for next year. Moving on to our 2013 bond. So we're really coming to an end of this bond. We've seen a number of expenditures for this coming school year. I still think that we're going to have a little bit of money left as of June 30th. We've already walked through the board. I believe it was in December what the plans are for those remaining bond funds. So we'll continue to carry out those projects. And then I'm assuming that we will most likely be done with our 2013 bond spending in the 2021 school year.
Excuse me, Mrs. Smith?
Yep.
Backing up a moment to the scholarship fund, that is
Yep.
fund. Those are dollars that the district simply disperses. Those are not dollars that we supply, correct? They have
That
been
is correct.
scholarships that have been set
Private
up by other
donation.
entities.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay.
So these
Just
are
wanted
funds
to
that must
publish
remain in
you.
this, yep, they must remain in the scholarship fund and used for the purpose in which they were designated.
Okay. Yeah, just want to make sure that the public knew that this is not K-12 school dollars that are being utilized for scholarships.
Yep.
They are all privately funded, yes.
Thank you.
And we have a few different capital projects fund. The first is our current sinking fund, and I'm excited to share on the next tab. We'll see our new sinking fund, the replacement sinking fund that was approved by the voters. So this right here represents our current sinking fund. We had the last levy this past July and this winter. And so now it's just a matter of using those funds for the designated projects, and then we'll be moving over to the new sinking fund for the following year. We have a number of projects that came before the board for approval, paving projects and whatnot. So we've got a number of things on the system, but my thought is a lot of those summer projects aren't wrapped up by June 30th. So some of that work will be continued on after June 30th. So I have included in the fund balance, just to explain my logic, you know, I am seeking the board's approval that if they happen to be done by June 30th, great. You know, you've authorized us to spend it June 30th. So you can see the ending fund balance is set to 0. But just like with the general fund, I'm assuming, you know, most likely that some of that work will be finished the next year. So if that's the case, I'm earmarking this, you know, $1 million just to, again, have the board's approval to spend it in the following year. So if we do end up spending everything by June 30th during the next amendment, I will update the budget accordingly for that. So please be rest assured we watch that closely, so we won't be spending more than what's come in. The next capital projects fund we have is a technology fund. Again, this was supported by our community, and so it's must remain here in this fund and be used for technology. Simply updating some of the expenditures during this final amendment. You know, it doesn't appear that we'll be using the full fund this year. So adjusting the expenditures and then putting in that carryover to next year's budget. And then we have our capital projects fund. This is the capital projects fund where our sale of property goes into. And so this was the fund we were talking about doing a transfer from. So what I've done is I've left some money in the budget for projects for this current school year that we've talked about, mainly the central office renovation being the largest of that. And we're doing some architectural work related to that at this point. So I've left some expenditures appropriated there. But then what I've done for the proposed budget is put in that $1.5 million transfer. So if we did need to do it, that would be, we'd be able to do that for next year. So that would be zeroing out that capital projects fund. So this next one is the fun one. This is our replacement sinking fund. And this again was approved by the voters in August 2019. I was a little disappointed. It was subject to a Headley rollback, but because of the increased property tax values, we're actually going to see more revenue than what we had originally anticipated when we were going out to the voters. Based on the property tax values at that time, we were anticipating revenue of about $7 million. And I'm happy to report, I think our revenue will be closer to about $7,250,000. So another $250,000 worth of funds available for the sinking fund. So that's wonderful news. And that, along with some interest income, gives us about $7.3 million worth of sinking fund revenue for the 2021 school year from this new sinking fund. So again, this was just approved by the voters in August, this past August. It was 1.6 mils. Because of the Headley rollback, at the public hearing on the 15th, I'll share that, but the actual mills levied will be 1.5934. But again, because the property tax values went up, that actually does generate some additional revenue for our district. And this is probably the least interesting one, I would say, of all of our funds is our school activities fund. I shouldn't say least interesting. The most kind of standard. We don't, I shouldn't say that because I know our buildings, this is what they thrive on. This is like their fundraising and things like that. So there was a new Government Accounting Standard Board statement that came out, GASB 84, that now requires some different accounting for that. And so really no changes from the last time we spoke about this, and I'm projecting similar spending patterns for the oncoming school year. So that is the last fund. I know I again went through that a little quickly. Hopefully I covered all the highlights for you. Again, this will be included in your board pack, so you'll have a chance to review it. And of course, you're more than welcome to reach out to me with any questions you might have. So. I saw Miss Frank, and I don't know if Miss Bonneville can see you.
Sorry.
Thank you. No.
Sorry. Go, Tammy? Okay.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, don't ever apologize, I think, for your budget. This is one of the most important things that we do as a board. We don't get into a lot of the detail of what the administration does, but this is one of the most important things. So I think all of your time spent on this, and I know it probably feels like you're talking in time, but it is so helpful to absorb how you're explaining it rather than to just see the numbers. So I know that you say it's all very straightforward, but it is helpful to have you go through with us and tell us what lines are and what's included in those lines. So I just want to thank you for going through that and for your patience in sharing it with us, because we don't see this every day. So it's helpful to hear what each line item is. So it's very, very helpful. And I think it's something that we take very seriously as a board. So thank you for your diligence and helping us prepare to make informed decisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Frank.
All right, I can see everybody again. Colleen, somebody else had their hand up?
No, go ahead.
Are we okay? We're good? Does anybody else have any other questions? Colleen?
I guess the only one that I do, especially again at looking at the fact that the $1.5 million transfer from capital project funds brings it to zero, that just makes me feel even more strongly that we not transfer that 1.5 out of capital projects funds. It's not realistic that a district our size has no capital project needs. I know that we would have the option to take money out of general funds, but those are the dollars that we try to designate more toward classroom dollars. Not that capital projects funds isn't, but I'm very uncomfortable with putting capital projects funds down to zero, knowing that we have needs that exist. I would rather see that 1.5 come out of the fund balance, even if that does take us down an additional %. That's just my opinion. I'm one of 7, but that's
Thank you, Ms. Burton. I think that's exactly the feedback and direction that we're looking for. So I'll of course ask that other board members, if you agree or we can get a consensus, I'm happy to adjust that even for the 15 or for the 1920 budget. Again, I can take that out really quickly just to let you know again what that would do. That would, not making the transfer from the capital projects fund, instead of a 12% or a 13% fund balance next year, it would be a 12%. So that would be the implication next year. And again, that's kind of the, we'll say a little worst case scenario again, and that's if we don't see any relief in that $650 cut for the current school year. But that's something we, I believe Ms. Oquist and I would both be, I'm happy if that's the direction the board would like to go, we'd be happy to make that change.
I concur. I concur with Colleen. I think we'd be better off using the fund balance and not transferring.
Tammy agrees wholeheartedly.
Karen agrees.
I think
Liz agrees.
yeah, for this year, I think it's just going to be hard to know where we are. And so I think eventually we might have to use that regardless, depending on what happens the next couple of years. So I'm okay leaving it where it is, but we might have to, depending how tight and how hard things get, we might have to make that transfer eventually. I'm okay leaving it there now, but I do think that I would rather see us use it than make more cuts for the kids eventually. If we are so tight eventually, hopefully that's not the case, but I'm okay leaving it where it is in capital projects now, but seeing how things work.
I agree with my colleagues. The funds that are in the capital projects fund are designated right now. They're designated for capital projects if we need them. And the funds that we have available in our fund balance are there for dipping into, which we need to do at this time. We can revisit this decision in subsequent years. But for this year, I think it just makes sense to leave the capital projects fund alone and to work from the fund balance like we were planning to.
Yeah, just along the same lines, I think, what people are saying is appropriate. I think, I don't want that misconstrued by anyone that I favor that over general fund money. I think the most important thing we can do is make sure the resources are there, the people are there to teach the kids day to day. So, if priorities have to be made, for me, those are the educational priorities come first. But at this point, we don't really know what the future is going to look like. So I think it's prudent to kind of just hold those in there now, like everyone is saying. I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I will go ahead and make that adjustment, make sure that's in the proposed budget for the board's vote on the 15th. And again, I think we've said it too, us taking that out of the proposed budget, if the circumstances change and the board feels differently in a few months, that's always something too that through a budget amendment we can change again. But I appreciate everybody weighing in on that, and we'll go ahead and make that adjustment.
And I'd just like to confirm that if something does change between now and June 15th, and we're able to make other adjustments, let's say instead of an anticipated $650 per pupil cut, that is narrowed down to $300 or perhaps even none for the 1920 school year. Based on what we heard last week at the study session and some additional comments, following that, moving those dollars back into capital projects, the next area of focus based on board feedback would be the targeted budget reductions of $400,000. And then from there, we would come back to you and talk about either the sale of property dollars and in which fund that will be directed, and the special education fund transfer of $500,000. So does that capture? I want to be sure that we're on the right track so that if we do receive any notification prior to June 15th, we will prepare the budget accordingly to reflect those priorities and direction of the board, because we certainly know, and again, I just want to reiterate for our community, for our staff, and for those watching, the board really concurred with placing a high value on maintaining the things we have in place for our students in the classroom at this time, the supports we've been able to put in place over the past 3 years, and the progress that we've made toward that. And so I really think it sends such a powerful message that this board has prioritized those items and has really allowed us to protect them in this budget as we move forward, because this is a significant planned use of fund balance. And so that is not lost upon us, that you have allowed us to continue to keep in place the progress we've made for our students, the progress we've made with our staffing, and the progress we've made with our employee agreements over the past this past session. And as we spoke last week in the study session, we understand that this planned use of fund balance is not a long-term viable financial strategy, but what you've allowed us to do and really supported the district doing is maintaining those things in place for our students, maintaining those programs and opportunities, and then really watching this closely over the next year as we see the financial landscape unfold before us. And so I really just want to acknowledge that, because that is a significant commitment on the part of our Board of Education. And I want to commend you for supporting these recommendations the way that you have.
Okay, do we have any more discussion on topic A? You guys are all set? Okay. Thank you, Allison. That was
thank you
again astounding. You do so much work for this. And I know that your colleagues all jump in and give you tons of feedback too. Okay, we're going to move on to B, the secondary fitness equipment replacement from the 2013 bond. And did Mrs. Archibald?
She's
is
here.
Okay. Oh, good. Yay. Okay.
And,
so
and I'm gonna take this one.
Oh, Teresa. Oh, I saw Cheryl pop on a couple of times. Okay.
We're
All
gonna
right.
we're gonna tag team this together, Mrs. Archibald and I. So
Oh, I see her. There she is.
I'm gonna just introduce you to our plan, and then Mrs. Archibald's gonna give you the details. So we are here this evening to make a recommendation to purchase fitness equipment for all 3 high schools and 2 of our middle schools. This will be using bond dollars from our 2013 bond. Mrs. Archibald met with her secondary department chairs throughout this past school year to identify what program and equipment needs they had in their weight rooms and fitness centers. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Archibald to give you more details.
Hi there. The equipment that we are replacing upstairs in the fitness center is some of our cardio equipment, which, believe it or not, it was 7 years ago when we had PEP. So those 7 years, they have seen a lot of use. And then downstairs in our weight rooms, some of our equipment is 20 years old, so we needed to update that as well. We are also asking to update 2 of the middle schools. Part of the PEP said that we needed to repurpose our current equipment that might work well down at a middle school that doesn't get as much of traffic. So we did that. So for our 2 middle schools that were able to find a place for a fitness center, we have equipment that's much older than 2013. It's going to go way back closer to 2000. So it's very important that we update that as well. I met with my department chairs and the middle school teachers and came up with a plan of what they wanted to do. A list of the equipment was identified and the bid closed on March 3rd. 6 companies did a bid. 1 did not have a complete one. So we will go through the other ones in just a moment. Based on the review, interviews, emails that I had done asking about certain equipment and brands, with our prior experience, we have had Matrix weight training equipment upstairs in our fitness centers, and those had upheld very well. So we were kind of excited to see that Matrix did a bid, and not only based on that, we also were able to really hone in on the importance of maintenance and repair. A few of the companies that we have used prior, unfortunately, have not been, let's say, up to speed on their maintenance and repairs. And a lot of times they have to take this piece of equipment out of our centers. It goes back to their warehouse where they wait, and we wait before we're getting it back. So along with this bid, it just became very, very important that almost equally as good as the equipment was how they're going to be maintained and repaired. The difference between the lowest bidder and the second lowest was about $832. And then between the second and third was the $1,550 respectively. So we will more than make up from those little dollar amounts in the maintenance and the repairs that Matrix can do. One piece about Matrix is that they are the manufacturer. And the only other company that was listed in our bid that was a manufacturer was Life Fitness. And you probably see that at a lot of different studios. Unfortunately, their bid was $129,000. That was much over our allotment of under $100,000. Learning that Matrix takes our equipment, builds it, take it right to the truck, and the trucks bring it to us when it's delivered. Their technicians are extremely well talented in their repairs and maintenance because that's all they do is they work on Matrix. I had also learned that from a couple other universities that have used Matrix, and they've been very pleased with all of the aspects of it. Our equipment is used close to 6 hours a day and then potentially at night with sports. So once again, those repairs and reliability was very, very important. Also, with Matrix, they only have high commercial products. And with our use, we need to have the high commercial, not just the light commercial. With Matrix, they offer two really neat programs. One is called their on-site preventative maintenance and repairs. Like I talked about, a lot of the companies take their repairs back and it sits and it waits. This doesn't happen with Matrix. Matrix will get to us within 2 days, and we will have it fixed within a week, if not sooner. And that's because they're only working on Matrix. I'm dealing with the Matrix dealer, so they have all of the parts that we need to eliminate that downtime. The second program, which I think is just, it sets it up so far apart from all of the other companies, is called a customer early warning system. They are able to analyze the repair history across the customer sites and equipment. The program then generates monthly reports, which are reviewed and acted upon by their customer service leads. This enables Matrix to take a proactive position in spotting potential maintenance trends, helping to make the appropriate measures to prevent minor issues from becoming large problems. That is very, very exciting to me as well. Teresa, you want to show the bid?
Yep.
Are you up there?
Is
Okay.
it big enough?
I see you.
Is it sharing my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. As you can tell, you can take a look at the majority of the companies with taking out the Life Fitness at 129,000. They're all very close. They're all within a couple $1,000 either way. Two of these companies we have worked with extensively over the years, and those two companies did not service us well. They wouldn't come on time, they didn't have repairs done, and like I talked, they would a lot of times go back to the warehouse and sit. So that kind of eliminated those two. And the difference between the second and the third is $1,550. I think we're going to way out make that with this choice. Any questions?
So we're recommending a purchase of exercise equipment from Matrix Fitness out of Cotton Grove, Wisconsin for $93,431.22. And again, that would come out of our 2013 bond.
Anybody's got a question, just hop in there.
Okay. Cheryl, how many pieces
Okay.
of equipment are we talking about?
About 15.
Okay.
Okay.
And they range tremendously from something very small like a barbell to an elliptical or a bike that can be $3,000 or $4,000 depending.
Cheryl, I think that looks, in my opinion, that looks good. I know we're not using the lowest bidder, but I think you made a compelling statement about why we would go with a little bit higher bid as opposed to the other two that you've used before and weren't as happy with as far as maintenance. So I would not have a problem going with a little bit of a higher bid. I think in the long run, I think you're right. We'll get more bang for our buck with that. So I wouldn't have a problem with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, are we, anybody else have any questions for Cheryl or Teresa? We're all good? Okay, we'll vote on this on the 15th then?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay, so now we are moving to C, furniture for English language learners classrooms, 2013 bond, and Teresa is going to help us out with that.
Thank you again. I am bringing a recommendation to purchase tables and flexible seating for our English language learner classrooms. As Mrs. Smith said earlier, we had some identified funds based out of the bond that we could use for our classrooms that might not have gotten some of the other updates that we had done earlier. And Mrs. Pearson spent some time looking at some of the catalogs that our elementary schools used to choose some of their flexible furniture. And she landed on Interior Environments and utilizing two different table setups. One was called Sunshine on a Cloudy Day. The table is shaped like a cloud. It is a whiteboard table for kids to write on with their teacher, or the teacher to write on with her students, and then 5 flexible seats. And the other is a more traditional teaching small group table, but again has a whiteboard top for the teacher to use with students and has 5 flexible seats. This quote is for $18,207. It would be for Roosevelt, Johnson, Coolidge, and Hoover. 2 of the Cloudiana Sunshine Day tables for Rosedale and 2 for Johnson. And then the teaching tables would be for Johnson, Coolidge, and Hoover. All of those schools have a designated English language classroom. Some of our schools obviously are getting support, but do not have a designated spot for the teacher to teach every day.
Questions? President Johnson?
Teresa, I'm looking at the documentation that you had with the bid. I'm assuming that's the furniture?
Yes.
That's pretty cool stuff.
Yes. That's why I put the picture in there, because when Mrs. Pearson sent it, first of all, the name was really cute. Sunshine on a Cloudy Day, I thought was just cute. But yes, that's why I put it in there. And then the Interior Environments quote is the next 2 pages.
Right. I just thought those seating arrangements look really neat.
Mrs. O'Brien, do we have any, I also think that they're very cute, but the legs kind of look a little spindly, just from the photo. Do we have, was there any feedback, or have you, is it going to stand up to our abuse?
So this is a company that other schools have utilized for their flexible furniture. So that's where she came up with some of the ideas. So my assumption is yes. I personally have not seen these tables in action with kids.
Okay. And does this furniture come with any kind of a replacement warranty, or if it comes and we're not happy with it?
I can double check. I'm sure it has some type of warranty, but I'll make sure I find out about that.
And it's furniture. It may not be a long-term warranty, but maybe even like 30 or 60 days or something to, okay. Does anybody else have any other questions for Mrs. O'Brien on the very cute flexible furniture? Okay. Then if there's nothing else, that's going to conclude Finance Committee. And President Johnson, we've been at this for a while. Is there any way we can get like a 3-minute break or a 5-minute break?
Everybody's good with that. We'll do that, and we'll be back in about 5.
Thank you.
Testing. Testing. All right, great. President Johnson, it's all you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. All right, we're back and we're going to move on now to item 5, our curriculum committee, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Johnson. And since we have already been hearing from Mrs. O'Brien, we'll let her just keep going and tell us about French textbooks at levels 3, 4, and 5.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. As you know, we have been working at updating our world language textbooks for the past 2 years. We updated levels 1 and 2 in all languages. And Mr. Miga, our world language facilitator, worked with our teachers in each one of our languages to begin to look at levels 3, 4, and 5. But when school closed in March, the only group that really felt ready to make a decision for next year was our French teachers. So we had representation from all 3 high schools working on looking at what they wanted and how they wanted to update French 3, 4, and 5 in our high schools. They wanted to keep in mind the same things they were looking for the past 2 years when they were looking at level 1 and 2, which was communication, culture, connections, comparisons, and communities. So world languages is not the same maybe as you and I took, where we spent a lot of time conjugating verbs, but instead students go deeper and learn about the culture and the people and make comparisons to their own lives with students across the world. So the high school teachers who represented the French world languages felt that they wanted to continue with the same textbook publisher, Preventative, and adopt their level 3 textbook. They wanted to continue for next year for level 3 to use the level 2 textbook we currently adopted and expand upon what they did this year in level 2. They felt that the textbooks go quite wide, but not very deep. And they wanted to stick to those 5 essentials that they were focused on for their students. So they want to purchase more level 2 books and then purchase level 3 books for French 4 and 5. So we are bringing a recommendation to you for Preventative level 3. We need 91 copies for levels 4 and 5 French at our high schools, and we need to purchase an additional 119 copies of the level 2 textbook. The publisher, much like Mrs. Jarvis asks all the time, if we buy the textbook, do we get the online portion for free? And in this case, we're purchasing the online platform and we are getting the textbooks for free. One of the things that the teachers really like is the Passport Student Edition online. It has e-readers, it has videos, so kids could listen to the language. And again, during this time of closure, they felt that that platform did an amazing job to help support their students while they were learning from home. So those pieces are included. In addition, they are also adding in the teacher materials for us. So this purchase is for $42,798, and how the quote came back was with those things as included in that cost, but then they identified that the teacher resources were free. So they put those in as free. I spoke to Mr. Miga about aligning our curriculum with the college world language courses, and he said that we are aligned. We align to our Common Core state standards. Our kids leaving French 4 and 5 are prepared to take world languages at the college level. And the shift that's occurred is the idea of going deeper into the culture and the curriculum, and not as much of the written product that maybe high school world languages were before, but more the communication, being able to read, to understand, and to speak the language. He also said that Preventative has a level 4 book, but it is aligned to an AP French course. And we don't offer AP. So he said the committee felt that they could align their standards with the level 3 book and not need the level 4 book.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mrs. O'Brien? Very good. Then we'll let her tell us about the 5th grade science textbooks.
Okay. So I am also bringing to you this evening a recommendation to purchase Amplify for our 5th grade classrooms. Last year, we brought a recommendation to you for Amplify for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And as we rolled out the program, one of the things that has been a piece that we've been trying to do at the Academic Services Department is to really try and build some coherence at our upper L's. Our standards tend to be 6, 7, 8, and K5, but our buildings are 5, 6. So where we could find ways for students to have the same platforms, the same curriculum resources, so that 5th grade teachers could collaborate with their 6th grade colleagues on the same things, we were looking for that. So once our 6th grade teachers began to use Amplify, we started a committee with 2 5th grade teachers at each one of our upper L's. Webster, because of the way they do their multi-age classes, the 5th, 6th grade teacher was already using Amplify, and Nijiiro had one teacher teaching 5th and 6th grade. So there wasn't a need for us to look at a pilot at 5th grade for either Webster or Nijiiro. The teachers began to teach one unit before we closed, and then all of our 5th grade teachers have been using Amplify since the school closure. Amplify opened up their product for us to build a unit around their topics and utilizing their platform. So Mrs. Corey brought back the 6 original teachers and gathered their feedback, and also spoke to the other teachers who have been using the product since the closure. And they have 100% agreed that they'd like to make the recommendation to purchase Amplify for 5th grade. It's a little bit different of a program at the elementary level. We'll be purchasing 3 units, 1 for each trimester to start. And then we will see if we need to broaden that. So we are looking at an earth science unit on earth and sky, a physical education unit on modeling matters, and a life science unit on ecosystems. So the program comes in individual units. We have 18 classrooms that we will be purchasing materials for. Amplify will be providing us, we will be paying for 1 day of professional development. They'll be providing us another day for free, and they will be providing half of the shipping and handling. So they are giving us $5,867.60 in complimentary materials, and we will be purchasing $58,427.60 in materials.
All right. Any questions for Mrs. O'Brien?
Mrs.
Mr.
Jarvis?
Johnson?
Mrs. O'Brien, what are I see the units, what are the kits?
So the kits are the materials. So it is an online and has online, what's the word? Mrs. Frank, what are those called that the kids do?
They're hands-on. They're the
simulations.
Simulations. There you go.
There you go.
Sorry, I couldn't help you.
Thank you. No, that's okay. You helped. The simulations are online, Mr. Johnson, but there's also hands-on activities where they do science experiments in class. So it comes with those materials in order for students to do that. There's also books, both online, and they come with books, physical books.
Are the items in the kits, are those a disposable item?
Some are, things that we will need to refurbish each year.
Okay.
So one of the things we did this year is really look at taking what is in the Battle Creek science kits and take out what we would use in Amplify and create a supply closet at our upper elementaries for the things that they need. And then we're collecting the things that they won't need.
Thank you. And by the way, I want to say I appreciate the information that you provided, not only for the science, all of the additional material that you provided us that we could see and read through. I think that was very helpful.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I had one, just for clarification. There's 3 different units you're looking at, earth science, biological science, and physics. Are those 3 going to rotate among the 3 triads during the 3 trimesters, or are all 3 triads going to have all 3 systems all year?
We are purchasing them so they have them all year in their building. They may want to do some shifting of units within their school, but one of the things, again, we have found during this time of closure is that everybody doing the same thing at the same time has really created some strong collaboration for our teachers. So Mrs. Caldwell and Mrs. Corey have worked with teachers right now to create the 1 unit based on Amplify. So I would think to start, we'll be doing the same unit at the same time, but as teachers become more comfortable, then there might be some shifting as the years go on.
I can see them wanting to continue the benefits of collaboration.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, you are on a roll, Mrs. O'Brien. How about if you tell us about the sociology textbooks, please?
I would love to. I am bringing to you a recommendation to purchase sociology textbook for our high schools. Again, this has been a part of our textbook plan, and Mrs. Finkel has been working with teachers from each one of our high schools to update and align their curriculum to the Common Core state standards and make sure that their class meets the rigor that we want to have all of our students experience. They looked at the current textbooks that are available for sociology, and they have chosen the Real World, an introduction to sociology that is a 2020 version. The committee followed the board outline of how to have a textbook adoption. They piloted the materials before we closed, and we have principals support in, and I didn't say that with the other 2, but the principals are in support of these recommendations. One thing about sociology is that currently for next year, we will only be running sociology at one of our high schools. So although we will be adopting this textbook as our sociology Livonia Public School text, we're just going to purchase, we're going to be fiscally responsible right now and only purchase 1 set of materials and 1 set of licenses for next year for the courses that are being run at 1 school. Yes, Mrs.
So quick.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure that for anyone listening, that they understand that that's based on student interest. So that is not a budget reduction, or that is if we had students that were full complement of students that were interested and we were able to run that course in either semester at either of the other high schools. I believe I'm correct that we would be bringing forward recommendations to purchase books for those classrooms at this time. That it is simply a matter of choice for students. And at this point in time, rather than buying those additional textbooks for the year and having them sit on a shelf, we'll certainly have that option next spring. If we have students who are interested in taking the class for the following year, I just wanted to be sure when we said that we were only running it at 1 school, that that's really based on student selection and choice. And thankfully they have many program offerings from which to choose. And this was definitely a textbook in need of replacement. And so as that interest grows and we have those needs at the other schools, we will certainly be bringing to you a recommendation to purchase those books and ensuring that they have those opportunities as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. And this recommendation is for both, it comes with a 6-year license and online access and a textbook. And the teacher resources are complimentary. So we're purchasing 40 copies and 40 licenses of the sociology book at a cost of $4,735.80. And like I said, the teacher resources are included in that.
Are there any questions for Mrs. O'Brien? Mrs.
I
Frank?
have, I just wanted to say, I think that this is also, when we talked about budget, very important work, but this is also one of the most important things that we do, because I think providing materials for students that is timely and appropriate and that can bridge their skills, I think is very important. Even for Amplify, I just wanted to go back for a second. I know that first year is hard because it transitions from such a textbook space to an online. I know that some of the teachers this year had a little bit of a struggle with, do they do the assessments? Do I do the assessment? You know, that sort of thing. Are we gonna, I know you have some PD days in there, but I think that it's just a real big transition in terms of the mentality. Do we have some ongoing training for them that our staff can be in there, not just the first couple of days, but as they figure it out, and what is the teacher's responsibility? What kind of does the program just automatically do and that sort of thing? Could you talk a little bit to that?
Sure. So this past year, Mrs. Corey brought in the representative from Amplify for our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers, and she taught a lesson with our students. So the consultant did the teaching, our teachers did the observing. So it was like a learning lab situation. She met with the teachers first, set up her lesson, what she was going to do, what she wanted teachers to look for. Like Mrs. Frank said, this is a shift in our science instruction. And then she worked with the kids and did the lesson with the kids. And then the students left and went back to class, and then she debriefed with them. She also went to each of our middle schools and spent a full day in their classroom supporting them while they were teaching Amplify. I think the last PD day was actually just a few days before we closed for the year. And we have additional professional development left from that purchase for our middle school teachers. And then we have 2 more days with this. And that's definitely something that needs to be continual and ongoing so teachers feel comfortable with the new platform and the new way of teaching. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Then we'll move along and have Mrs. O'Brien tell us about guided reading materials for English language learners.
So this is my last recommendation to you, and it's just a part of our updating what we're doing in our classrooms, and I wanted to bring it to you. The cost is not very high, but I just wanted you to be aware and share with you just how wonderful the Pioneer Valley guided reading materials are having an impact on our teachers and our students in our elementary schools. The literacy footprints comes with a lesson that identifies for teachers the vocabulary, the word work, how to do the writing aligned to the text. And so as teachers began this year to really utilize that, they really felt like it was making a difference in their teaching. And so to come to you and ask for your approval and support to purchase an additional set of the similar materials, have the same lesson plans, but these are identified titles for English language learners. So the Compass program is right along hand in hand with what we have in our general education classrooms, but these leveled texts are meant for English language learners. So the identified words and text and lessons help support a student with growing in their ability to read and write English language. And so I'm asking to purchase 3 sets of these materials so that our teachers in our English language department can utilize them with their students. One of the other bonus things that have happened this year is like turning on a dime like our teachers did to go online. Literacy Footprints from that very first week just began to upload their books electronically. They created a site, they uploaded videos that a parent could use for a book introduction, and then leveled books and just every week added more and more books during these last several weeks. So that access we had because we purchased all those books, that would be the other plus to purchasing these for our English language classrooms, is that those teachers then would have access to the online books also. So they would be able to pivot on a dime, just like our classroom teachers.
Any questions for Mrs. O'Brien? Okay, thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. You've had quite a lot reporting tonight. I appreciate all of your hard work.
Thank you very much.
And now we'll move on to summer programs, which will be a team effort with Mrs. Scott and Dr. Terrell.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis. At last week's study session, we talked about summer SAC and about Jackson childcare for the summer. And at that time, we were under a stay-at-home order until June 12th. And options were considered, and the criteria for operation of childcare services was reviewed from the CDC as well as the Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Board. And after carefully considering all the factors, it was determined at that time to not offer summer childcare at Jackson Center or summer SAC programming for school-age students during the summer of 2020. And although this was a difficult decision, knowing the impact of this action would have on our staff and families that have used these programs, we thought that was necessary. However, in regard to the governor's order issued today, we would like to take a pause over the next couple of days to consider any further guidance that may be given for providing childcare. There are many hurdles that were put in place prior to this announcement that caused us a lot of concern, and including how many can gather in one space indoors. And additionally, the potential cost prohibitive of having to staff these programs at a higher staff ratio for social distancing may impact any plan that could be created. But again, we would like to take a pause with this decision to consider any additional guidance that may be given to us.
I'm going to hop in just for a moment here, and just so this is new. This is a shift from where we were a week ago, right? And I don't know that we won't still move forward with this decision, which we know has an impact, as Mrs. Scott said, on our families and on our staff. But one thing we really need to take a look at are the resources we have as we prepare for next school year, and the physical resources, the manpower resources, and what it would take to prepare to turn around and get this program up and running at this late date, as well as the interest of parents in taking part in this program based on what may be a shift in fee structure based on the social distancing requirements and the staffing needs that we would have. So again, we're going to take a few more days on this. As you know from our study session, we were going to notify the Board of Education and the community this evening and send out communication in the next couple of days with regard to not running the summer SAC program for next year. And again, knowing that does have an impact, but also realizing that the way that that program is structured and how we utilize the facilities, even with this allowance, would still be greatly impacted. So we are going to take the next couple of days. We will certainly keep you apprised as a board, but we really do believe we need to focus primarily on the academic summer programming for our students. We feel that at this point is our primary responsibility. We're going to talk about those in just a moment with Mrs. O'Brien, Dr. Terrell, and Mr. Willenborg. But we're going to take a look at this, look at the child care offerings as well as the SAC, the summer SAC, and then communicate back to you on those pieces, as well as take a look at our offerings, our academic and social emotional supports for students in those other programs. So I'll turn it out now over to Dr. Terrell, who's going to briefly talk about ESY, our extended school year.
Good evening, board. So as I stated last week extended school year is for students who qualify for those services who also happen to have an IEP. So every summer we offer extended school year. It is 3 days a week for 3 hours, starting right around July 7th for this year, ending the week of August 13th. So we're running the program for 6 weeks this year. We have a certified special education teacher as well as speech and language pathologist to work on our students' IEP goals and objectives, communication, and transition. So again, our plan at this point in time, through discussion with the assistant superintendent at Wayne County RESA, as well as other directors in Wayne County that run extended school year programs, is for this program to be virtual at this time. But taking what Cindy just said into consideration and Superintendent Oquist, that those options may change. Teresa?
As you know, we also offer Title I summer camps to our students who have a reading or math need. Typically, we run those camps in the summer in the month of July. This past spring, winter, Mrs. Pearson and I had decided to move them to August, to right before school, thinking that it could be more of a springboard to start school. And there was also some grant monies to support students, preparing them for the Read by Third Grade reading bill. So at this time, and as I shared with you last week, we have not made a determination yet whether we would want to do some small in-person camps. Both we renamed them this past year to Camp East and Camp West. In addition, offer some possible reading instruction or math instruction online. So based on today's new information, we'll take that into consideration and make it a part of our whole plan of how we're going to support our students academically. Mr. Willenberg?
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Thank you, Ms. Jarvis. I'm speaking to our high school summer school program. You know, our traditional in-person at a brick and mortar building summer school, you know, we plan on replacing, as I mentioned last week, with a virtual or remote summer school, which means students can sign up for summer school, but course content will be delivered through an online platform known as APEX. You know, our online classes during summer school will be supervised by certified teachers, and we will be using the same licenses and credit recovery courses that we do in our high school academic success skills credit recovery course. You know, summer school will plans to run from July 6th to August 6th, and the registration link went live today. You can find it on the front page of the district website. It has tabs for all the courses that are offered. That the registration allows students to sign up for a variety of ELA, math, social studies courses. There is no science, there will be no science courses or PE courses at this time. The cost for LPS students will be $290 per course, with reductions based on the free or reduced status. That's where we stand with our high school summer school program at this time. I'll turn it back over to Ms. Jarvis, or open the field for questions for any of us.
Any questions for Mr. Willenborg, or for Mrs. O'Brien, or Mrs. Scott, or Dr. Terrell? Just
a quick comment. Thank you to all of you for your hard work on this. With all the fluctuating changes, it is really difficult to try and organize and put together programming, especially with all the last minute or different changes that are happening. And I do agree, you know, we do need to, I'm glad you're focusing on the academic part, although I think it's very sad that the SAC program and the Jackson Center daycare is, you know, we're not sure what's going to happen yet, but I just give you a lot of credit for, it's difficult to make these decisions, and you have to understand we have to plan ahead for these things. So, it's hard when you all of a sudden things get changed and numbers are changing. It's difficult to just flip right around. I just want the community to understand it's hard to change your program in the middle of all the different things happening. So kudos to you for looking into things and also just making a plan and trying to stick with it. I think at this point, we have to move on. We've got to figure out what we're going to do in the fall, and we certainly don't want to miss some of these students that need the extra support along the way. So thank you for all you're doing for that. We really appreciate it.
Dan?
Yeah, I just want to echo Mrs. Bradford's sentiments. I think, it's very tough right now with how things are going. There's a lot of unpredictability, and we need to be flexible. And our staff has been really flexible and trying to make the most out of difficult situations, and really doing the best we can for kids. And I can tell that that's what people are focused on every day. So, things will change, they'll evolve, but I'm proud of the work our district's doing, and will continue to do. So thank you.
Anyone else? Mrs. Frank?
Mr. Willenberg, just to clarify, are those course recovery classes, or those classes that we offer in the summer if kids can't fit them into the schedule? I'm sorry if I missed that, if you said that, or they're just course recovery if they wanted to redo a class?
They can, our summer school is designed mostly as a credit recovery situation, but the courses are, legitimate courses that can earn a student credit in ELA 9, ELA 10, U.S. history, world history, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2. So it offers the platform we use, Apex. We buy the license for our credit recovery class during the school year. So it's just a continuation of those licenses through the summer.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Burton, you had your hand up?
Yes, Dr. Terrio, talking about the ESY, the extended school year, is that a program that especially now that it's virtual, the parents are going to have to be much more hands-on with that program? Is that something that we offer to all of our students with IEPs, or just is it designed for a certain portion of them? And do the parents have to agree to participate before we go to the next step of getting the student involved in that?
Yep, those are great questions. So the IEP team, which includes the parents, makes the determination based on data on progress on IEP goals and objectives, as well as if the student's at a critical stage of learning, is at risk for regression and unable to recoup those skills over a period of time, as well as the nature and severity of the student's disability. So those are the three criteria that a student can qualify for. So not every student with an IEP qualifies for extended school year. It is an IEP team decision. Currently, our parents do play a role in remote learning. So our extended school year programming will have 3 days of live sessions, as well as activities that the parents and the student can do together. That has been working quite well for our population. So that would be the plan moving forward for extended school year.
Okay. And about what percentage of our students with IEPs participate in the extended school year? Just a ballpark, not that it's
Well, so primarily our students who qualify for extended school year are our students in our Act 18 programs that have moderate to severe autism. So we have 132 students in our program, and we have invited 61 students to attend our extended school year program.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just, may I, Mrs. Jarvis, follow up with a comment with regard to summer SAC? Again, I know we spent just a short period of time on that, but just really to put this in context, when we think about the task force that we have in place to prepare for a safe return to school in the fall, we are just now receiving the initial CDC guidelines. We've not yet received the guidelines from the MDHHS or the MDE regarding guidelines for the district for the fall. So one of the other things that we took into consideration was that is our focus at this time, and we have the next 8 to 10 weeks to really plan and really dig deeply into our process for doing that safely. There's considerable things that we learn each and every week about the virus and the spreading of the virus and ways to mitigate that spread. And while we continue to learn that, one of the things, to be very frank, that we would want to be very certain of is, would we be prepared to do that in just a couple of short weeks when school ended to transition to a summer SAC program? So beyond some of the restrictions with regard to how many students can be gathered in one place, indoors, the fact that program relies heavily on things normally like field trips and gathering of large groups for programs or assemblies or start of day, end of the day, lunch, and so on. Those are all of the things we want to be taking into careful consideration. And are we prepared to do that in this period of time? And that was why initially our recommendation was that for this summer we would take a hiatus. And again, we know we serve about 120 to 130 students in that program. And so we certainly don't take that decision lightly, but we also believe that it is imperative that really our focus is on not only the safety and well-being of our students, but of our staff as well. And that as we direct our resources, whether that's preparing our school buildings or our plans for the fall, that we're really able to be sure that we're able to do that in the most effective way possible. So those are all the things we'll continue to consider over the next couple of days as we take a look at the most recent order that just came out this afternoon and see if that shifts our thinking at all. And then we certainly will get that information out to our families.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mrs. Burton.
Just a comment, Mrs. Oquist, of kind of a follow-up to what you were saying. I know I've been asked, I assume everybody on our board and our cabinet has been asked, what do we really think is going to happen in the fall, and what are we hearing, and what do we know? Literally, we found out at 3 o'clock this afternoon on the radio or on television that the governor's orders were changing, along with everybody else. The schools don't have an in with information that's different than what the public is being given right now. And it would be oh so helpful if we did, because we could be a couple steps ahead in the planning process, but we literally are learning and going through this right alongside everybody else. I commend our district and our staff for all the work that they're doing to stay on top of it. And like every other industry, we're all learning as we go here, but we don't have any extra inside information that anybody else in the public doesn't have on any of these topics.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. I appreciate everyone's ability to be nimble and to still maintain a laser-like focus on what's best for our kids and our LPS community. We don't know day by day how things are going to change, and like Mrs. Burton says, we're making this up as we go. We're all learning together. But when we have the same focus, it makes our job that much easier. And it also really highlights how much this board and this cabinet really do focus on what is best for the kids. So thank you for that. And now, last but not least, we will hear from Mr. Willenborg on the MHSAA annual membership renewal.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jarvis. Certainly we don't exactly know what athletics will look like in the fall or next year, but we do know we want to be members of the Michigan High School Athletic Association. Each of our middle and high schools have been long-term members of the MHSAA. Membership is a voluntary consideration, but if our schools wish to participate in postseason tournaments that lead to district championships, regional and state championships, we must have an annual membership resolution approved by the Board of Education. The membership resolution in your package stipulates that our district and our schools are adopting the Michigan High School Athletic Association rules, regulations, and interpretations as our own rules, regulations, and interpretations. We essentially become signees to the Constitution and the governing bylaws of the MHSAA for each sport. With our approval, we incur responsibilities to educate our community regarding the rules and to monitor compliance within our programs, to investigate violations, and to administer penalties. I respectfully request your continued support of our membership in the Michigan High School Athletic Association and ask that this item be added to the consent agenda for the regular Board of Education meeting on June 15th.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Willenborg?
No, ma'am.
Well, then we will definitely add it to the consent agenda.
All right, thank you.
And President Johnson, that concludes the Curriculum Committee report.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Just to make sure we clarify, under finance, items B and C, I'm assuming are going on the regular agenda. Everybody agree?
Yes.
Okay. And items 5A, B, C, and D all on the regular agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
So C and D do not hit the limit for a board vote. So I don't know that they need to be. I
So-
kept them on there because they're part of our textbook process, but the sociology book is only like $4,000 and the guided reading materials are about $3,000. So they don't need an official vote. I added them in so that I was continuing to communicate with you what we're doing moving forward. So I don't believe they need to be on there.
All right, then we'll only put A and B on the regular agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. Then that moves us to item 6, our legislative committee, and Mrs. Bradford.
There we go. Thank you, President Johnson. All right, and last but not least, tonight we want to bring before the board a possible resolution for school funding, our budget shortfall, and we want to take a look at that. And I think Mrs. Oquist is going to discuss it, but many districts around our area are bringing forth a resolution to send up to Lansing. And I think also we're asking for some U.S. congressional support. So Mrs. Oquist, are you going to handle this? Thank you.
I am. Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. So Mrs. Bradford and I have discussed this resolution, and it is in your packet, and it was also an attachment that Mrs. Wozniak sent to you. We'd like to bring this forward at your regular meeting of June 15th. So oftentimes we ask for either our community, our Board of Education, members of our administrative team to join us in our entire staff and community to join us in our advocacy for adequate funding for schools. And we've brought resolutions forward on other important topics as well, the third grade reading legislation and other topics. And so there are certainly times when we do ask ourselves the impact that these resolutions can make as an individual district. And really what I think we are attempting to do across this state of Michigan through MASB, the Michigan Association of School Boards, as well as MASA, the Michigan Association of Superintendents, is really to garner as much support from individual school districts so that collectively we can bring forward, hopefully, hundreds of resolutions from school districts across our state to implore that we get the support at the federal level for those additional dollars to address the shortfall in the revenue estimates based on the sales tax impact from COVID-19. And so, Mrs. Bradford, I don't know if you'd like to read through each section of the resolution, or if we'd like to have that read aloud, but I think it would be worthwhile to take a moment to share that with our community. And then what I'd like to do is also send this out to all of our parents and all of our staff and indicate that this is something that our Board of Education is planning to bring forward and share not only with our governor, but our members of the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, as well as our local state representatives. So they are aware where the Board of Education, the Livonia Public Schools stands with regard to a request to deal with the school funding budget shortfall for this year.
That sounds great. I think if you want, we can go through and kind of just read it, and then maybe since we have some time, if anybody wants to suggest some changes, if there's any changes, or if you like it the way it is, we could get some information from our board if they want to make any changes to it. Does that sound okay for everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. School funding budget shortfall due to COVID-19 pandemic. Here's the resolution. Whereas in March 2020, Michigan announced the first case within our state of the coronavirus disease that causes COVID-19, causing the governor to declare a state of emergency under her powers in the Michigan Constitution. And whereas in response to this emergency, after Michigan school districts were required to cancel in-person learning, school districts have risen to the challenge by being innovative and focused on their unique needs, providing distance learning for all Michigan students. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has created tremendous uncertainty on how to provide quality education while maintaining safe conditions for both staff and students, causing districts to face new expenses and challenges for the upcoming school year, including providing personal protective equipment, creating new health screening procedures, increased cleaning and sanitation costs, reorganization of learning spaces to accommodate social distancing, and expanded access to school-based mental health services. And whereas both the state and national economies has suffered greatly as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has dramatically reduced state and local revenue, placing enormous pressure on the state budget, including the school aid fund, which is predicted to be more than $1 billion below previous estimates for the next 2 years. And whereas due to falling revenues, local school districts face severe budget shortfalls for the current fiscal year, which ends June 30th, 2020, including a potential untenable proration cut of at least $650 per student, and similar budget challenges for the upcoming year, making it extraordinarily difficult to provide high-quality education, access to technology, and safety for both students and staff. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Livonia Public Schools School District supports the passage of legislation by the U.S. Congress appropriating needed funds to be distributed to states and local districts with maximum flexibility to fill budget gaps during this state of emergency. And be it further resolved, the Livonia Public Schools School District urges congressional action to provide additional funding for the highly successful E-rate program, which helps schools ensure connectivity for online learning. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be transmitted to our governor and to all members of the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate representing the families in our district, as well as our state representatives. And then adopted by the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District, Wayne County, Michigan, at the regular meeting thereof held this 15th day of June 2020. If there's anybody that has any one is interested in making any changes to it or have any input, if you want to speak now or any comments.
Yep, I have one.
Go right ahead.
I just have to open up that document. So
Mrs. Jarvis, correct? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
My only clarification is in the first whereas, where it says that Michigan announced the first case within our state of the coronavirus disease that causes COVID-19. Actually, COVID-19 is the disease, so it should be the coronavirus disease known as COVID-19.
Oh, okay. Very good. Anybody else? Mrs. Frank.
The first time I read it, I was reading it through our elected officials from those eyes. But if we are going to transmit this to our staff and our parents, I'm just not sure, and maybe you all can help with this, but I just don't know if we should further clarify the $650 per student. I know we say current fiscal year ending June 30th. Would it be helpful to that? I just don't know that they're saying it's retroactive. Are they getting that it's retroactive, that it's going back to the 2019? That's where I just thought as a parent, would I understand that it meant the year before? And maybe you all, that made sense to everybody else, but I'm just wondering if a parent who's not, is not knowledgeable just about school finance, do they know that it meant the previous year? And I think you stated it clearly for people who are, who are working with school budgets, but I just didn't know if that would be helpful to say previous, but I get you say that it ends June 30th, so you would technically know that.
Crystal, I agree, Crystal. I think it might be nice to say, like, put the year, the 1920 school year, and then the 2021 school year to make it a little more clear.
Yeah, and maybe state that we're facing that 650 per person cut for both years. Is that what you're saying? Both currently
and years. I think it is in there both years, but I just didn't know.
Maybe we could have it say for this current school year and fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020.
May I suggest in the fourth paragraph, so before we actually get to that next paragraph, how about at the end of the fourth paragraph where we say, which is predicted to be more than $1 billion below previous estimates for the next 2 years. I think it would be clear if we said more than $1 billion below previous estimates for the current and coming school year, or the current and coming fiscal year, so that that's clear that it's really the shortfall is for each of those years. And then in that next paragraph, we talk specifically about the shortfall for this year as well as the upcoming year. So maybe breaking it out in that fourth paragraph as well.
And can I make a suggestion to make it a little more clearer? And when you say local school districts in that fifth paragraph, local school districts face severe budget shortfalls for the current 2019-20 year. I don't know, something to make it more clear that it's happening right now, and it's going to be happening in the upcoming year, 2020-21. Is that too much, or would that be too much to say?
No, I think we're again, when we say the current school year, as a parent, I'm thinking of 2021. 1920 is done, right? That's last year to me, even though our fiscal year is June 30th. So
most
I really
parents think it's done, right?
That we need to call out when we're talking about either current or past or future or whatever we use the 1920 or 2021 designation to really call that out. And then for us, I think we really understand what $650 a student is, but I think for the majority of the people with numbers, that 650 is not a very impactful number. And I would like to say maybe 600, which equates, yes, to $9 million. So, I mean, we need to get across to people, and now that somehow get across, this is almost $20 million, right?
Right,
So,
total, $9 million per year that we're facing.
and that I don't know if we can even put that into a percentage of what our what our budget is. I mean, I'd really like to, if it's going to our parent, it needs, and I know you guys, I would just like it to be a little more impactful to, those individuals that are far outside of the financial side of running a school district.
Mrs. Oakes, could you look at these types of suggestions and send that back out to the board prior to our voting on it on the 15th?
You bet. I'll actually have it back out to you this week so that you have additional time. So I'm going to beef up paragraph 4 and 5 and more clearly delineate the budget shortfall at the state level, what that means on a per pupil basis, and then what that means in aggregate for our district, both this current school year, and I believe we'll want to keep in there which ends June 30th, so people understand that we're talking about really we're in the last, we're in the closing days of that, and then again an additional $9 million for next school year. So both
make it abundantly clear that that first cut is a retroactive cut.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, one of the things that I would maybe, and again, I think that we've never, since I've been on the board, sent something like this to the parents. And I think that it's good because we kind of reserved our ability to say, this is a big deal. We didn't send these every other day or every other month. And so, one, I know the administration was all saying, what do you mean that you think the school year has passed? We have miles to go. I know that. But I do think that most parents are saying, my kids are already like moved. Like when people say, how old are your kids? I am saying, they're junior, because it feels like it feels like we've been finishing this school year for a long time. So I do think there is a piece, even when we say the current year ending June 30th, I think there is a piece of saying the past year of 1920 as opposed to the current year, because I just feel like by saying past or prior or retroactive or something like that means it's, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. But anyway, you can work on it. But I do think when you say current school year, we're all thinking current next year.
Done. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
And I think in my communication to our colleagues, our staff on Friday, I think I said, with 4 weeks remaining or something to really indicate that we were talking about the inability to mitigate that kind of cut with changes in our expenditures with only 4 weeks remaining. Although we have done that, and we really have, as you know, froze a number of things to really try to make an impact there. But really, I think I understand exactly what you're saying. And so a couple things. I'm going to suggest some changes to the resolution. What may be helpful is to also share with you a cover letter that would go with this, so that this wasn't the only communication for the parent community on this topic. So perhaps in there, that will allow us to have some more explanatory language in the cover letter, so that the resolution and for our legislators receiving that, it really gets down to brass tacks and shares the message that we want to give. Does that balance what you're asking for?
Yes.
I think so, yeah. Does anybody have any additional comments? Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, we can, Mrs. Bradford, I will send that to you and to President Johnson for your review first, and then once you give me some feedback, we'll send it out to the whole board after you as the legislature has had a chance to take a look at it, and President Johnson, and then we will plan on bringing it forward on June 15th.
That sounds great. Thank you. I don't think we don't have any further legislative information right now.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. That'll take us to item 7, Personnel Committee. Mrs. Frank?
We don't have anything. I don't believe. Thank you.
Do not.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. That takes us to item 8, our Policy Committee. Mrs. Burton?
We do not have any policy. I do have one quick thing to make sure that the board is aware of, and it really fits into policy as well as anywhere else, really, or the committee of the whole. Just in reviewing some of the information we've received from MASB, the Michigan Association of School Boards, recently, they've made the determination to hold the fall conference virtually. That has just a host of sessions and classes for school board members. And in their effort to try to make sure that we stay as informed as possible, they're offering to do so free of charge for all member districts, which is a considerable savings. So we just want to make sure that all 7 of us were aware of that, and having it be virtual would allow us even more flexibility as board members to pop in and out for various classes or sessions. So that typically happens the first weekend or so in November, first or second weekend in November. So just to kind of keep that on the radar. And there's nothing else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. And that brings us to the end of our agenda for this evening. So again, I want to thank everyone for hanging in there. Our few little technical glitches, we got them taken care of and we got through the meeting. So thank you one and all, and we are concluded this evening. Thanks.